Okay, so I'm Chris with Salinas Public Library. We are having a graphic novel contest, and for that, we're doing some interviews with some graphic novel creators. We're interviewing Chris Grine today. So Chris has been working on Animorphs, the adaptation to graphic novels, and he also recently put out Secrets of Camp Whatever. Hi, Chris. Welcome.
Hey.
Thanks
Nice
for being here.
Yeah.
So kind of the first question I had for you is that I know a lot of comic book artists and creators I've talked to spend a lot of time doodling on about stuff when they were kids. What was something you used to like doodle? What was something that you remember drawing before you became?
I used to have this. Well, I can't really think of a time when I wasn't drawing, but I would say probably like second or third grade. I had like this like sock puppet character. I don't know what it was that I had made, and then I had then kind of started drawing it as a character and kind of turned it into like my own little comic strip that probably looking back now would be just awful, but at the time, like that was just, it consumed a lot of what I did. And that kind of got me interested in creating more characters and creating my own stories and things like that. So I'd say prior to that, I was probably just drawing random stuff all the time. But after that, probably second or third grade time, I started kind of actively trying to create my own smallish stories and worlds and stuff like that.
Yeah, cool. What was your first graphic novel that you created, whether it was published or not published, that you consider?
Well, that would be the Chicken Hair. Chicken Hair actually was it was originally published in 2005, and that was my very first book. And let's see if I can find that over here. So this was the original version from Dark Horse Comics, and that was my very first published anything, and it was entirely black and white. At the time, I actually requested for it to be black and white because I was a big Jeff Smith Bone fan, and I just love that. And some of your viewers or whatever may have seen the newer version of Chicken Hair, which was brought out with Scholastic, and I got to colorize it and kind of fine tune a few things on it. But that's been that was my very first graphic novel, and I was lucky enough to get it kind of picked up. So
yeah,
that's awesome. It's going to be a movie next year.
Cool.
Movie, right?
Yeah, that's like the dream. What do you know anything about that you can share about the movie? Like,
well, I mean, I've got to read the screenplay. The screenplay is really, really good. It's very funny. It's a little different from my stories because they kind of took my stuff and they've adapted it to kind of fit more of a cinematic kind of a thing. But I was kind of nervous when I first got to read that because it's like, this is my baby, right? This is my first book. But I was so pleased and so happy with just how funny it was and how great the characters were. And I've gotten to see a few very small clips. And then a few months back, I posted some still images on some of my social media that were just kind of blew me away. I just was not expecting it to look. I watch a lot of cartoons, way too much for like an adult to be watching cartoons. But so I'm very picky with my stuff, and I was prepared to kind of have that kind of a knee-jerk reaction to like, oh, that's not what I thought. But I was so happy. I cannot wait. I'm so excited for it. So,
that's so cool.
Just to see a trailer, just to see more of it. I'm excited. They're doing a great job.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Where did you come up with the idea for Chicken Hair?
Oh, that's a long... Well, the name Chicken Hair actually was, and it's kind of hard to tell now, I have a slightly different hair. I have a cowlick. I have like two cowlicks right in the front of my hair. So my hair, no matter what hairstyle is like in at the moment, my hair is standing straight up in the front. So it comes in and out of style over the years. Right. But I had a friend in college who referred to me as Chicken Hair a few times and I don't know why, but I really like that name. And then when I was trying to come up with like an idea for a comic, I thought, that was really I really like that name. And it kind of gave me an idea for that character. And honestly, when I was creating the first Chicken Hair stuff, I was using that as like an exercise to learn how to do digital art, like Photoshop and like that. So I kind of just used that as a way to like force myself to learn these programs. And then I got so involved with the characters, I fell in love with the characters, and then I decided to just keep going with it beyond that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where Chicken Hair came from.
Yeah, I'm really interested in how people come up with the ideas for the graphic novels they create, because I mean, the people who are going to watch this are all brainstorming and figuring out what they're going to draw, and where these ideas come from. And it can come from something as simple as a nickname. It's kind of fun to know.
That's kind of how it happened. And then, once I had the character, then I just was trying to figure out a story, like some kind of an adventure to put him in. And so I came up with a villain that was a taxidermist, because it made the most sense of somebody, excuse me, who might be trying to capture this very unique kind of creature because he wanted to collect it. So that was just another one when I was just kind of brainstorming ideas, and then it just kind of blossomed from there.
And what year? You said Chicken Hair was 2005?
Originally, I think it was 2006. Actually, I think I was working on it in 2005, but I think it was published 2006.
And when is that when you first started kind of creating graphic novels professionally?
Yes, yeah, that was my first thing. Actually, there was one version of Chicken Hair I did I didn't know anything about getting into comics. I didn't know how to do anything. I didn't have any comic book friends who worked in the industry at the time. And so I just started submitting stuff, and I did like this 22-page black and white Chicken Hair kind of comic strip. Is completely different from what ended up in the graphic novel. And I sent it out to all these publishers, and I was so excited, and I got rejected like across the board. Like everybody said it looks great, but no. But a lot of them offered really good advice and some suggestions on how to improve the story or ways I could make it better. And then, so I started doing that because, that was what I wanted to do. So I was trying to listen to the advice. And about 6 months later, one of the editors at Dark Horse reached out to me just kind of out of the blue and asked me if I'd been working on it, if I had taken any of their advice, and wanted to see more. And that's kind of how that happened.
That's great. So I was wondering about your process for creating a graphic novel. Kind of, what does that look like? Like, where do you start? I know we talked about Chicken Hair, but maybe one of your other graphic novels. Do you start with writing? Do you start with characters?
A lot of times, like I'll have story. I got to come up with a story first, or at least an idea of a story. So like Camp Whatever. I kind of wanted to do I had a couple different ideas for different graphic novels. What happened is it kind of came together as several of those ideas. I had an idea where I wanted to do kind of like a magical forest type of a thing with magic and wonder and different creatures and stuff. Because from movies I love, like Legend and Spiderwick Chronicles and things like that. Just things that are just very, very fantasy based and stuff. And then, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do with that. I knew I also wanted to do a story with about a camp, like a spooky camp or something. But I also didn't know what to do with that. And then one day, I like to take walks. Sometimes just let my brain just run wild. And sometimes that's where I get my best ideas. It just kind of clicked that I needed to combine these two stories together. And as soon as that happened, then I was like, all right, that's the kind of story I'm going to write. Now I have to figure out who are the main characters? What's going to happen? What's a good villain, to kind of offset the heroes and stuff. So it's organic for a long time. And once I get all that nailed down, then I'll start doing character designs and just kind of pulling research. I love to order books that I ultimately don't read. For research, because I just love books and stuff. I have tons of books on gnomes now and vampires and Bigfoot and all kinds of stuff, and I'm sad to say I didn't get to read through as many of them as I wanted to, but they were kind of still sitting near me, kind of inspiring me to just kind of keep going. And that's how that starts. And once that begins, then once the art begins too, then writing also kind of starts happening along the way too. And my first drafts usually are terrible. I wouldn't show them to anybody, rough drafts of my writing, because it's all over the place with first person, third person. There's probably the grammar is just awful. Sometimes it'll just be just dialogue, sometimes I'll do a little sketch or something. And it makes sense to me. It's kind of like just a train of thought as I'm working through the storyline, and I'll go through and I'll start expanding on that kind of those ideas that I have and try moving things around. And the more I do that, the more solid it becomes. And when I feel like it gets to a point where it seems to have a really good beginning, middle, and end, and the character seems strong enough to do it, then I will start working on pitches and stuff to start sending out to publishers and start getting some feedback and see if there's any interest in it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
When you do your illustrations, do you use paper or do you use a tablet?
I am 100% digital these days. Although when I first started with Chicken Hair and things like that, I was more on paper. Although I've done all the actual comic work has been digital, but I'd say over the last year or so, I got an iPad Pro, which I can draw on that anywhere. It lets me be mobile, and I mean, I can pretty much mimic a pencil as well as anything on that. So I do most of my sketching on that now too. So I used to have a little bit of paper, and pens and stuff around, but I largely don't have that anymore either. So I guess that's a long answer to your question, but yeah, I'm mostly digital nowadays.
Okay, nice. Would you say that nowadays you have to be digital?
I don't think you have to be. I know a lot of people who aren't, but I do it simply because of time constraints. Because people who do, the traditional inking, which is just beautiful. Oh my gosh. I mean, looking at these things it shows, it just makes me insanely jealous that they're so beautifully done. But they've all, at some point, those have to get scanned into a computer and then digitally cleaned up, and then sent to either the publisher or then sent to like the colorist to work on them. And since I'm doing all the work myself on most of my stuff, it's just easier for me to do the inks directly in the computer. Do my even my sketches on the iPad Pro. I can just send it right to my main computer behind me and just start inking in there. I don't have to scan stuff and clean things up because it's all ready to go. It's mostly just because of time. It just takes so much extra time.
Nice. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense. Do you have some software that you recommend that for someone getting started?
Well, if anybody's, I know iPads are, pretty common these days. You don't have to have an iPad Pro to use a program called Procreate. Although if you have an iPad Pro, Procreate's kind of like the standard for that, I think, these days for people working in comics and things. But you can get any kind of like a stylus that works on your iPad. That's what I would recommend if you have access to an iPad or whatever. It's Procreate. And then on my computer behind me, I mean, I have like Photoshop I use for color. There's a program called Clip Studio that I use for all my inking. And then I use a program called Adobe Illustrator for all my lettering, word balloons and such. It gets a little technical at that point, but I would say if somebody's just looking for a great program that pretty much can do all of that stuff, Procreate is the way to go, and it'll let you be mobile. You can have your tablet with you wherever you're at and just draw, and it saves it all. I mean, you can create folders and keep it all very handy, and then if you need to send it somewhere, you can easily attach it to like an email and email it to yourself, or text, message it to a friend if you just want some feedback. And you can also go on the internet right on your iPad and pull up photo research, which I do a lot. I mean, it's wildly helpful. So that's what I would recommend. If anybody has access to an iPad, that's probably the way to go. I constantly try to get my kids to use mine, but they're like, no, I don't want to. Okay, fine. Fine.
And then so you've been working on, you've created an adaptation of some of Animorphs. You're working on more. You have another one that will be coming out. What's it like adapting someone else's material? So you talked about your process, how you like to come up with, some of these things. How do you start with adapting someone else's stuff?
It was nerve-wracking at first, I'll be honest, because honestly, when it's somebody else's stuff, if it's being adapted, usually that means on some level it was successful enough that they want to adapt it to something else. So, and when things are successful, there's a fan base, and there's also people who created the original ones. And with Animorphs specifically, that fan base is gigantic, and it's been around for 20 years and hasn't really gone away. I mean, that says a lot because there hasn't been any new books for almost 20 years. And so I was a little nervous, and I didn't take for granted the opportunity that I was being given. And so it started with character designs and a few sample pages that Scholastic wanted to see to make, just to test me kind of to see if I was a good fit. And once I got done with that, I was deep diving into the books, and I was trying to listen to the podcasts and just kind of quietly spy on the fan base a little bit to see what it was about and what people felt strongly about. So, in case it came to a point where I needed to cut something out for time or do something, I wasn't cutting the wrong stuff out or the things that the fans were really wanting to see. But at the same time, I needed to make it my own a little bit. So I just kind of started going. I just started doing the pencils right from the book. So instead of having to write a script, the script was basically written for me, and I just had to start going. And my plan, I just kind of went through the whole book from start to finish with pencils. And I thought, I got to about page 230 or so, and I was thinking Scholastic was probably going to say, this is probably too long. We just need to trim it down a little bit, which I was fine with. But surprisingly, they didn't. They were really happy with it. And so, and then the most nervous part was then they sent it to Catherine Applegate and her husband, Michael, who are the actual authors, to get their approval. And I was a mess. I probably chewed off all my fingernails in like 2 days. And their notes just came back. They said, yep, love it. Like I was like, oh, okay. So
I feel good.
Yeah, well, I might have felt better with a little bit more feedback, even, but it was fine. So I just kind of started, once the sketches were approved, then I just started doing the inks, and then and at every stage through this, whether it was the sketches and then the lettering and then the inks and the color, every step got sent to them, to the authors, to sign off, and also people at Scholastic were signing off on it too, and so they kept me on track. If something was going wrong, they would have let me know, I guess.
Yeah.
But I would even, I finished the whole first book before it had even been announced. So I was still really, really nervous, and then I remember they told me they were making the announcement the next day. They contacted me to let me know, and it would be all over social media. And I was a hot mess for, that evening and then the next morning, because I was excited, but so nervous at the same time, just for the reception. I was so scared because they were showing sample pages.
Right.
And it went over really well, and the fans were just so excited. They were excited to have it, in any form, but they were just really excited about what I was doing and my art, and they were reaching out to me almost immediately and following me on social media and just being the kindest people. It was the most welcoming environment I could have hoped for. So and ever since then, it's just been just more of that, just very fun. I love to interact with them, and they make it fun to work on these when it is a lot of work, but they kind of get me through by joking around with me online and talking with me. If I have a question, I can just post it on social media, and there's like a million people will answer. Like if I have a question about, some aspect of a story, or like what something should look like, or so I've used them as much as other sources for coming up with the designs of stuff, or the way things should look or sound, or anything like that. It's kind of been, this is a longer answer than you were probably looking for, but it's been really fun and fulfilling doing the adaptation. I didn't think that I was going to enjoy adapting somebody else's work as much, because I really like writing my own stuff, but I have really enjoyed this so far. It's been really fun.
That's great. I was wondering if you could show us any of your work, how your artwork looks, or something about your process.
Yeah, I'm gonna share my iPad here, and then I will take you through a few things.
Sure. Thanks, Chris.
Give me just a second here to share my screen. All right. Okay. So this was a page that I penciled. And there wasn't a lot of dialogue on this one, so I thought this would be a decent one to show. This is what my penciled pages look like. And this is all on Procreate. So like I said, I can pretty much mimic what my penciled sketches used to look like. So because that's just something I like to see when I'm sketching, is like a pencil. It doesn't have to be that way. That's just a personal preference, because that's how I've always done it. And I don't feel as detached from it when it looks like that, at least. So this is what it looks like. And then I can, I guess it's not really moving that. Okay, sorry. I was trying to move the screen, but I guess I couldn't. So anyway, that's what my sketches look like to begin with. And then the next step then would be that's the final one. Then the inking. And it's not quite as exciting as the sketch, even doesn't have as much movement and everything, which is always a little disappointing to me, because the sketching lines and stuff just seem to be much more movement and a little bit more exciting. And then when I get into the line work, for me at least, it feels a little stale, which is when I get to bring in the color, the next step. And there's probably about 15 layers of color there, from like just the flat colors. And then I'll have, a layer with shadows and a layer with highlights, and if there's backlighting, like between their legs on the bottom right, the light coming through there. This just, that's that part. So, and then the next step is obviously with all the sound effects or word balloons or whatever's going on. But that's kind of how I work. And the pencils take the longest because I'll know like what a scene, the beginning and end of a scene, right? I know how the scene ends, whether it's my book or even if I'm adapting Animorphs. And so I always try to make sure that properly ends, on a page that when you turn the page, it starts a new scene, or at least it doesn't like pick up in the middle of a scene, like right, like a middle of a page. It always ends where it should end on a page, just for flow. And so, and a lot of times, like I'll do these penciled pages, and I'll have to end up redoing them, or at least when I'm working on the iPad, I can select these panels and move them around, or I can copy them and paste them onto other pages to try to move them around if they don't seem to be flowing correctly, or whatever. Which is one thing that's really nice about working digitally. You can just kind of copy and paste and move things around. Whereas if I was working traditionally, I would just have to erase it and start over, or maybe make a copy of it and print it out again, or do it. But it just saves me a lot of time. So
yeah. And that's that Toast there.
yes, that's when
Yeah.
he first falls out of the cabinet.
I like his kind of sort of crumpled look that he's got going on.
Yeah. Yeah, he was one of my favorite characters from that book. I didn't know he was going to be my favorite when I started, but the more I got to write him, I tried to write his dialogue something that would make me laugh in every scene, just kind of the way he saw things or the way he processed information that he was being told just didn't quite make sense with what everybody else was saying, or he didn't get sarcasm or whatever it was. I had a lot of fun with that character.
Yeah.
Probably why I picked that page.
I have a question. When you have to draw an image, a character, let's say that it's someone who's going to be yelling, for example. Do you look at reference images, or do you already have in your mind the way that character is going to look?
I usually know how that character is going to look, and like I said, I watch a lot of cartoons, lots of movies, and when I had like 5 years of art school, art college, where 2 or 3 years of that was just straight anatomy drawing, figure drawing for just hours and hours upon hours every day. So I'm generally okay with that stuff, but I do pull up a lot of references on Google or whatever, like especially on hands and feet. Some expressions, like there's been a couple where I needed somebody to like yawn like this, kind of with their mouth open and kind of half covering their mouth, and I just can't, maybe I just can't get that to look right, or so I'll just type in Google like somebody yawning, woman yawning, and it'll bring up a bunch of photos, and maybe there's one that kind of works pretty well, like a similar angle. So I can kind of look at that. But at the very least, there's other examples of what I'm looking for, and I can get an idea for how that hand should be bent or whatever. And that's where a lot of my reference comes from is things like that. Not as expressions as much as I guess just hands and feet for real, but there are some times where a total face expression that I need to look up. But yeah, definitely photo reference is huge. When I was in college, which would have been ancient times ago, in like late 90s, all we had was like a Polaroid camera and a friend who would maybe hold their hand at the right angle you could take a picture of. And if not, if you had a regular camera, you had to wait to get the film processed or whatever. There was just no internet. There was no way to easily, just have thousands of images to pull from and use for reference or whatever you need to do. It's pretty awesome these days. It makes it a lot easier.
And for a more personal touch, now you could just use your phone and take a picture of your friend yawning, and then and then work that into your picture.
Wow, where were those back then too? I mean,
right, it's just immediate.
Oh man.
Let's see. Do you have any tips or recommendations or stories about getting started with graphic novels for someone? Our graphic novel contest is kind of open for kindergartners through 12th graders, so it's a huge range. But just for anybody maybe in that range, something they might want to know from your experience.
I would just say don't let yourself get overwhelmed by creating like a graphic novel, like an entire book, because that's a lot. That's a lot. I mean, I would say start with one page. Start with a character and give them something to do. They have some challenge they have to do on page one. Maybe it's just a conversation and it's a joke. it's a setup for a joke, or somebody gets a bucket dumped on their head of water or something. Start there, and then you can expand on that. You could then say this is what happens after that happened, or don't get overwhelmed by trying to set out to make an entire graphic novel, because that's a pretty guaranteed way to just get frustrated and stop. So I would say have fun creating characters. Make a villain if you want to, and then put them in some kind of a conflict. But you don't have to go overboard and make it. I'm making a 25-page book or a 30-page book. Just make what you can do, and take smaller bites of it and get used to it. If you do a 1 or 2 or 3 page comic and you really had fun doing it and you love it, then your next one you could say, okay, well, the next one's going to be 10 pages, or kind of build up to that. Because I didn't start that way. If somebody had said, hey, Chris, you're finally going to get your opportunity to make comics, but we want you to do a 270-page book, I probably would have said, no, thank you. That sounds awful. Because that would have just been too much at first. So I would just say, make sure you're having fun with it, and don't try to do too much like right out of the gate. Excuse me. I don't know if that's helpful or not.
I think that's good advice.
So you do all of your sketches, inking, and coloring? Mm-hmm. You don't have any type of help?
Nope. And lettering and writing and whatever. Yeah, it's all me. All my stuff is all me. The Animorph stuff obviously was written by somebody else, but yeah, all the art and everything is all me. And part of that is not because people haven't offered to help me in the past, but I'm kind of a micromanager, and I don't like to share my toys very much. I'm really bad at that. So it's kind of my own fault that I have as much work as I have, because I just don't play well with others, I guess. But yeah, that's a personal choice. But yeah, it's all me.
Do you come up with like a color scheme for certain characters, or for a whole graphic novel? Do you kind of go with certain shades and ideas like that, or?
I usually try to do that by scene by scene, and I found a couple of cool ways just in like when I'm coloring to pull the whole page together with like one solid color. And I don't want to get too technical, but like in Photoshop, you can create like a layer. Like say it's outside at night. Like if you're looking through the Camp Whatever book, and the outside stuff it's cooler and a little darker and a little bit more blues and purples. And that's just really, I can color it exactly the same way. And then on the very top layer, I can create a blue layer and set it to do something. So basically it gives everything that tint, just a slight tint, and it kind of pulls it all together that way. So as far as like, what I'm trying to say is I'm not that sophisticated when it comes to color. I know a lot of cheats though, that I've learned over the years to kind of help with it.
I noticed in Camp Whatever, there's a lot of blues and a lot of cool colors, but there's also a lot of night scenes. So that might be why I noticed that.
Yeah, and there's a couple like daytime scenes too, like right in the morning when they woke up in like the camp, and I will, instead of using like a blue color for that, I'll throw in like a really warm yellowish orange color, and it does the same thing, except for it warms everything up like a lot. So it looks more like morning, or like when you first, open the window and it's just too bright to look outside kind of a thing. And again, it's a form of cheating, but it seems to work for me.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of typical as an artist. You look for ways to not have to reinvent the wheel every single thing you're doing. Yeah.
And I do have like a file that I'll have open with like all my characters with their color palettes on that, so I can quickly sample. So I'm not constantly having to open up old pages to figure out what color I was coloring something.
Yeah, and I like how Willow's hair brings out a different kind of color to each shot too.
Yeah. Yeah, I really enjoyed doing her hair purple like that. In the next book, I think it's going to be like it's like a aqua blue color.
Right.
So she's really into coloring her hair. But I loved the purple hair so much that I was like, okay, I got to do a different color now, because that was fun. I'm going to try something different.
Did you have any summer camp experiences like that led you to some of this?
I did, and it kind of spilled into Camp Whatever, which was kind of my angle on the camp. When I went back to talking about how I knew I wanted to do a camp book, but I didn't know what to do with it. And one of the things that clicked with me was I did go to camp one year, and I had heard from friends. It was the most amazing time ever. And and they'd gone to the same camp like 3 years in a row, and they missed all their friends, and they were always writing each other, because this was before emails and stuff and texting. There was none of that. And so I finally went with them one year, and I was like, this is going to be the best summer ever. And then I hated it. So much, because I realized I would have rather just been home drawing. Like, I was perfectly happy just being quiet and drawing. And so I avoided a lot of the activities, and I hid in my cabin a lot. Like the thing Willow does right when she gets there.
At the beginning. Yeah.
Hides in her cabin and sleeps the day away. That was what I did on my first day. And looking back now, the counselors were trying to be nice to me, trying to get me to come out, and, and I was kind of being rotten. But that was kind of the angle I wanted to take too, because I think there's a fair amount of kids who maybe don't enjoy camp as much as other people do, but they have to go anyway. And so I thought, maybe some kids can relate to that. Maybe they don't, but that's my experience. And so that was what I was pulling from, me being a terrible, terrible camper.
Yeah, that makes sense. Did you end up having, I know you talked about a favorite character, but do you have any favorite supernatural creatures?
In general, or like in the book?
Kind of in general. Or is there anything? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm such a fan of most of that stuff, cryptids.
Yeah.
I love, like, there's podcasts I listen to and books on cryptids and just that type of stuff. But I'm always been fascinated with that. I love gnomes. I love the idea of gnomes. Which is one of the reasons why I really wanted to make sure that they were prominent in my books, because I just think they're hilarious, or they can be hilarious. Although they can be kind of dark too, and that's something else I'm kind of exploring a little bit. And gosh, anything like that. A lot of the stuff I like to take and like put my own twist on it too.
Yeah.
Make it my own a little bit, like I did with the gnomes. Like that's kind of in my idea. Like that's where garden gnomes came from. They're actually just gnomes that have been
living. Turn to stone.
And like I just made it part of the thing when they got scared that they would turn into concrete, and that was
Sometimes I feel like I do that. I turn to stone a little bit when I'm scared.
I think we all do to some extent.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Go ahead. Luis, go ahead.
Yeah. So this is volume 1.
Yes.
And you mentioned that you were planning on having 3 volumes.
Yeah.
Do you already have, you don't have to share with us, but do you already have the ending in mind?
I do. And I'm almost done inking book 2 right now. So I'm going to be coloring that starting probably late next week. So book 2's coming together pretty well. I was told by my editor that it's a lot more scary than the first one, which I hope is a good thing. Like it's still all ages, but I think, it's definitely a continuation. It's not a whole nother story. It picks up like 2 months after the events of book 1 and the repercussions of that. And there's a lot more going on, and the story definitely gets a little darker. But I'm really excited to get it out there too. And I think second one comes out next summer, probably about this time next summer.
So maybe it could be a question you can't answer, but are the fog leeches real?
Okay, that started off as a joke of like them taunting each other with that constantly, but they are real in the second book.
Okay.
Yeah. I did make a panel of that, and it made me so happy.
It kind of just took on a life of its own, right? Like
It did. It was like, that was one of those things too, where I was talking about how I like to, when I write, like that wasn't in the script. I just was trying to come up with like funny banter while they're walking through the woods. Like surely one of the kids is always trying to scare the other kids. I mean, I've been in groups of kids walking around in places we shouldn't be,
Right.
and someone's always, being a smart mouth, trying to get everybody else scared or whatever. And so that was just something I was just trying to make myself laugh. But yeah, you're right. It did kind of take on another life of its own. And
as I was reading through the book, I kept wondering if I was actually going to see a fog leech, which, I mean, it wasn't the most important thing, but it was in the back of my mind somewhere. Am I going to see a fog leech?
Well, you will get that, and you'll probably be disappointed in book 2.
That's okay. I mean, that's part of the fun. The disappointment can be part of the fun.
Yeah. I've also got there's some very, very tiny unicorns in the second one too, that are just the right size for Toast to ride.
Nice. So, that sounds great.
Yeah, and they're actually, in my opinion, probably one of the funniest characters in the whole in both the books, as far as being ridiculous.
There's been a lot of kind of deconstruction of unicorns lately, and this is a new one I haven't seen, but that sounds fun.
It was fun. It was an idea I had for probably over a decade of these little unicorns. So I'm excited to get that out there in the world too.
Yeah. And when do you think book 3 will come out? Will that be, I know that's that way down your road.
It would be a year from next summer, but in that fall. So
okay.
At least that's the release dates I've heard. They could get moved around a little bit.
Okay.
So, another question.
Sure.
So you have these books that you have to complete. You have a deadline or a timeline. Mm-hmm. How much work do you put on each day? How many hours do you work a day to complete this timeline?
Well, my days are kind of broken up a little differently. Most probably because I work from home, but also just because of the nature of the projects, of comics and stuff in general. But so I'll wake up usually about between 8 and 4. I will be setting up my computer or setting somewhere with my laptop or with my iPad drawing, whether I'm actually inking or coloring or doing pencils. But then like in the evening, say after dinner time, the kids are outside playing or whatever, if I could squeeze in a few extra hours of writing or maybe just taking care of other little things that I need to take care of. There's lots of little technical things, like a lot of the, like all the cabins and camp, whatever, right? I built all those in 3D. That way I could rotate them around and the angles were always right. In Animorphs, there's like spaceships and lots of buildings and stuff. And I build all that stuff in a different program called SketchUp that then I can just kind of rotate around and take screenshots, kind of what I need. And then I'll drop that into my art. So that takes a lot of time too. And that's not time that I really account for in the time of actually working on the graphic novel, I guess, even though I probably should. But there's just a lot of stuff like that too, that I'm working on even when I'm not technically working, I guess, or even if I'm going for a walk and all I'm doing is thinking about the story or trying to figure out a way to fix a plot issue or, some kind of a funny joke or a better way to end the scene. So I'm constantly working, whether or not I'm sitting at my desk or not. And that's not really a bad thing because I do enjoy what I do, but sometimes it's hard to turn my brain off and force myself to take a break, a real break.
That makes sense.
Thank you.
All right, Luis, do you have any other questions?
No, that was my last question.
Okay. Chris, anything else you wanted to share?
I'm good. No, I'm just really happy to be here, guys. And like I said, I hope I wasn't too dry and boring. I tend to get real technical real fast sometimes with questions because I love talking about this stuff. So
yeah, and I think it's really fascinating, and I think there's something there for everyone to kind of grab onto or not and grab onto something else. So yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Chris. Chris, I appreciated you being here and talking to us about this.
Yeah, and if anybody has any follow-up questions or anything too, they can just email me directly or whatever you guys want to do with that. That's fine.
Okay, great. What's your next work coming out?
The next one coming out will be Animorphs 2, and that will be in October.
Awesome. Okay.
Next one.
All right. Thanks, Chris. I'm gonna end the meeting now. Thank you.
All right. Have a good one, guys.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. It was really fun.
It was fun.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Later, guys.
Mm-hmm.